So going back to those early years, so John Williams was an important formative influence for you, an important mentor. What did you learn mostly from John Williams, for example?
Well, I'm not sure I learned a great deal from him at all. The reason for it was that he had a very busy practice, but a lot of it was in Newcastle, so he was away from chambers a lot. Then he took silk at the end in November '61, so I was only with him about 3 months or so. And then I spoke to John Carney, who later became a Supreme Court judge, and asked could I read with him on the equity side. And he said yes. So I read with John Carney then from about sometime in, I'd say, November '61 until I went to Newcastle in April '62. But there was no real teaching of me by John Williams. He introduced me to some solicitors, and he got me to do some work for him in terms of writing opinions and matters of that nature. Deviling, yes. But I can't remember. I appeared with him in the High Court in what's a famous High Court case called Sigomatic and the Commonwealth in 1962. But that was the only case I ever appeared with him in it.
I only asked because your advocacy style, that many have paid great tribute to your advocacy skills, and I wondered if there had been important figures in your early years whose advocacy you in turn admired and who you felt you'd like to emulate, or at the very least their example was something to go by.
Well, Smythe was the great illustration. What happened is that the bar introduced reading lectures in the year I came to the bar, '61, but they were very informal compared with what they are today. But there was a legendary lecture given by Smythe on the art of cross-examination, and there was no Selborne in those days. It was only 180, and practically there were, I think, about 410 at the bar in those days, and I suspect 400 came along to listen to Smythe. He outlined his method of cross-examination, which I immediately adapted or adopted, I suppose, probably even a more accurate expression. And then, after I was retained by Rupert Murdoch, Smythe had the senior retainer, so I always had many cases with Smythe, and this is nothing to do with me, but he never lost a case when I appeared with him. He was a wonderful barrister.
Do you get the impression that with all the troubles Rupert Murdoch's going through now, he wishes Smythe was still around?
Yes, I think. But what I learned from Smythe was, so far as cross-examination was concerned in particular, that instead of attempting to destroy witnesses, you should use them to construct your own case. And he used to conduct cases on a single sheet of paper, no matter how complex it was. He saw what the issues were in the case from the pleadings, and he would write down on a sheet of paper on the left-hand side the facts he had to prove in respect of each issue to succeed on that. And then he'd have some arrows pointing out from each of those, what I'll call ultimate facts, that made that ultimate fact more probable than not. So his strategy was to seek to get admissions from witnesses called by the other side, and I've got to say he hated calling witnesses himself and avoided it if he could, to prove each of those facts that made things more probable than not. And only as a last resort would he ever attack the credit of a witness on the other side. He always used to say you should try out the witnesses on the other side to see what you can get out of them before you start attacking them. And so that was a philosophy so he was more interested in using the other side's witnesses through cross-examination to prove his own case rather than attempt to destroy the other side's case as such.
He felt, in other words, if you gave those people enough rope, they could hang themselves?
Well, I'm not.
I know that's not a very nice expression.
No. He had an extraordinarily quick mind and an extraordinarily recollection of the evidence and everything that had been said. And he used to approach what I call the stepladder approach. That's just my term for it. But if his objective was to get to a fact or an ultimate fact, which I'd say was metaphorically was at the top of the ladder, he would start on the bottom rung and he would just gradually go each step leading to the next step, leading to the next step. And he totally dominated witnesses because he was so quick, and the next question was coming the instant that the witness's answer finished the next question. They were always short questions. Very rarely did he have a question with more than, say, 10 or 12 words in it. They were very short, mainly could be answered yes or no, and that was his whole technique. So he dominated the witness and got on top. That was his technique. But the other person who probably had a greater influence on me generally was Harold Glass. Harold Glass had probably as good a mind as anybody I've ever come across. He won the University Medal for Law and he shared the University Medal for Philosophy. I'll tell an anecdote. When I sat on the Court of Appeal with him, he and Dennis Marnie and I sat in a case called Cambridge Credit against Alexander. And one afternoon as we were coming out, Dennis said to Harold and myself, he said, the trouble with you two is, he said, you don't understand causation. And he said, you should read The Cement of the Universe by J.L. McHugh, whom I regard as one of the world's greatest philosophers. Quick as a flash, Glass said, I'd be inclined to agree with you about that, Dennis. He said, Mackie and I shared the medal for philosophy at Sydney University.
That is fascinating. So did you have many opportunities to talk with Harold Glass a lot?
Oh, yeah. Well, Harold Glass and I wrote a book together.
Yes, well, I would imagine in that sense. But as far as the sharing of philosophies yourselves?
Yes. And I did a lot of cases with him as well, common law cases and appeals. And he taught me the importance of legal principle, how to formulate legal argument, and I was a very close adherent to his teachings in that respect. I was probably a little bit more flexible than he was. If he had a weakness as an appellate counsel. It was that he was too rigid, he had worked out a logical argument with a series of propositions.
And he wouldn't budge from it.
No, he found it very difficult. Now, Keith Aiken, the great Victorian appellate advocate, was much the same, but Aiken could not be diverted and tended to dominate the court, including the High Court. But he would patiently answer questions, and no matter how irritable the judges were with him, he'd just resume his argument and carry on. If Harold got under attack, particularly from Barwick, he tended to retire a bit, but people today probably don't understand the dominance that Barwick had on the Sydney bar in particular. I mean, people at the bar when I came just stood in awe of Barwick as an advocate, and it flowed on when they appeared before him in the High Court.